Good morning to all of you. I truly am honored to be invited to attend this event again, to just share some insights with you about STEM workforce development, particularly as it relates to the participation of underrepresented minorities. I was thinking about the theme for this year's conference and found it quite interesting: enhancing NASA's infrastructure for the STEM workforce of tomorrow. And it is also quite appropriate given now all of the national attention that continues to be given to our global competitiveness and economic positioning. Throughout the nation now, there are calls to build bridges within the stakeholder community to address the myriad of issues relative to attracting and retaining, recruiting and retaining STEM talent. The recent reports that I will share with you indicate that we as a nation still have much work to do, particularly in two areas: retaining those trained in STEM careers, and increasing the participation of underrepresented minorities, women, and persons with disabilities in STEM. I chose the topic, expanding opportunity in STEM, the changing dynamics, to engage you in thinking about current efforts, especially at the federal level, to rethink strategy that drives our investments now in STEM workforce development, and to determine appropriate outcome measures to justify those investments. Why is this an important issue? Well, the recent budget debates indicate that we face the same needs and challenges in this country that we faced decades ago, but we may have fewer resources now to address them, and a lot more uncertainty. In addition, we examine our assumptions about STEM workforce supply and demand constantly as the science and technology community itself becomes more global, more virtual, and more interdisciplinary. So I'd like to use these headings to frame my comments to you. I'm going to reference some key policy reports that are guiding our nation, discuss the continuing challenges of underrepresentation of minorities in STEM, and describe some of the dynamics that are changing the way we respond to these issues. So here was the old problem. And the old problem was kind of described in this seminal report, Science: The Endless Frontier, back in 1945, where the country was trying to figure out now how to maintain a kind of a robust science and technology enterprise following the war. And this report itself kind of led to the establishment of the National Science Foundation. This one, again, just a different slant on the old problem to say, well, then fine, we're going to build our science and technology enterprise, but now we also have to think about developing a STEM workforce in order to sustain that enterprise. Our new problems are the same as the old problems that we had. Failing schools, inequitable education, the achievement gaps, attrition, and low completion rates, underrepresentation of minorities, the slippage in global rankings, and the need for relevant skills. So a number of recent policy reports issued by the President's Council of Advisors for Science and Technology, the National Science Board, the National Academies of Science, and the Center for American Progress, all present recommendations for Congress, the federal agencies, industry, universities, professional associations, and societies, foundations, and all the other stakeholders to take action individually and collectively to focus on this national priority. So here's some of the major policy drivers that are consistent with the Obama administration's directives in recommending an emphasis on STEM education, an emphasis on development of a strong and diverse STEM workforce, preparation and professional development of STEM teachers, equitably distributed in school districts in both urban and rural communities, and where there are large concentrations of low-income and minority students, and better coordination of STEM education activities. This report, the Expanding Underrepresented Minority Participation Report that I had the privilege of supporting, recommends two specific immediate priorities for this country. The first is to focus on undergraduate retention and completion. And why is that? It's because our study committee found that we have a cadre of students already enrolled, minority students already enrolled in STEM disciplines, but we have a problem with their being able to complete their degrees in a timely manner. So there are then lots of reasons that are discussed in this report about why that is occurring. The second priority is teacher preparation, college preparatory programs, and transitions to graduate study. The other specific policy recommendations emanating from these reports include these: developing reading readiness and early math skills as early as pre-K. And that's because the research shows that these foundational skills prepare students to be successful through high schools. Similarly, children who fall behind early tend to stay behind all the way through high school. A more recent National Academies report entitled Successful K-12 STEM Education, Identifying Effective Approaches in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics reaffirms these recommendations and presents still another long-term goal for STEM education in the United States, and that is to increase STEM literacy for all students, including those who do not pursue STEM-related careers or additional study in the STEM disciplines. Now, the last recommendation is somewhat complicated, and I put this one up here because this is kind of changing the paradigm somewhat. Recent data released by the Georgetown University Center on Education and Workforce purports that more rigorous standards, better preparation, and improved graduation rates are necessary, but are not totally sufficient to plug the gap in our STEM pipeline overall. It further states that the market for STEM competencies far exceeds the 5% of science, technology, and engineering occupations. As a result, the demand for STEM competencies throughout the economy diverts STEM workers into non-traditional STEM occupations, making what seems like plenty not enough to go around. And they label this phenomena diversion. They call it diversion. Diversion is the missing piece of the whole STEM pathway puzzle, and that occurs when students and graduate students kind of steer away from STEM at various points in the pathway. So they define diversion as a process in which students and workers who have demonstrated capability or perhaps even earned credentials in STEM don't end up in STEM fields, or if they do, they don't stay for a variety of reasons. So I've just put this little chart up here to show you how real this phenomenon is. And they provided these statistics to show that even persons who have earned a bachelor's degree in STEM, well, it shows the proportion of them who are actually in STEM fields. And this is just a few of the STEM fields that are represented in that particular report. The proportion of those that are in STEM fields, but look at 10 years later, you see a reduction of those that actually started in STEM careers, who actually earned degrees in STEM, who are remaining. So what they found is that personal preferences do matter. So we have to deal now with some of the human dimensions, human factors, in our thinking about STEM workforce development. Many students with high competencies in math, such as SAT scores, are deciding against STEM even before they enter college for a lot of reasons. And the other issue is that U.S. STEM workers are becoming part of an increasingly global innovation system. STEM is already one of America's more global workforces, and likely to become more so as innovation continues to become more global. The fact that STEM education is intricately linked to science and technology strategies contributes to the changing dynamics. Further, there is more global competition now for science and technology talent. Our competitors global competitors are using a lot of strategies to recruit talent, including luring expatriates and experts from abroad with superior financial support, offering the top working conditions and research facilities, expanding higher education opportunities to attract internal and external students, and recruiting multinational corporations to open science and technology facilities there. Because these countries understand the same thing that we do, and that is that talent is the Cohen on the science and technology realm. So the seminal report, Rising Above the Gathering Storm, made these 4 basic recommendations. So the conversation now says that we've got to go a little, though, beyond what's recommended in the Rising Above the Gathering Storm report, because we need to, as a country, begin tracking more and more the quality and the availability of research facilities and research support as a significant indicator of our attractiveness to the world's science and technology talent. The U.S. is going to have to continue to gauge the use of research talent and facilities, which portends the future of our country's innovation environment. So efficiency then will ultimately guide the use of research talent and facilities. For example, as agencies, NASA, the National Science Foundation, and others that fund research, basic research, need to be a little bit more cognizant of the impact of the administrative burdens that we place on researchers, for example, as perhaps one of the reasons that some of them divert to other occupations. And this information is actually kind of described in another National Academies report that describes the science and technology strategies of 6 different countries with some specific implications for the United States. Okay. So we've made some significant progress in enrolling and graduating minorities in STEM, but we face still some of the same challenges. This chart that shows the pathway progression illustrates the issue that still confronts us, especially at the top of that pyramid. The NSF just issued another info brief reporting the number of doctorates awarded in science and engineering and showing that they declined by 1% from 2009. The doctoral awards were down in 5 of the 8 major science fields of study, with agricultural sciences showing the largest decrease, but computer science posting the largest gain. There was a larger percent change, however, though, in the proportion of science and engineering doctorates awarded to women than to men from 2005 to 2010. The number of science and engineering doctorates earned by minorities, and that is minorities who self-report themselves as minorities in the surveys that are given, rose from 21.8% in 2005 to 23.7% in 2010. And the number grew during that same time period for practically all of the underrepresented minority groups except Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders. But we know that these are increases over a very, very, very small base. So our current challenge now is how to sustain these incremental gains that we've seen. The Underrepresented Minority report that I had an opportunity to work on at the National Academies talks about the role of post-secondary attainment in this country, because all of the discussions, political discussions, are now showing the importance of post-secondary attainment to global competitiveness. But reports are continuing to show that the United States ranks 5th in the Global Competitiveness Index for 2011-2012 in those rankings. So here are the findings from the National Academies report concerning post-secondary attainment in this country. And we know that the Obama administration, the Lumina Foundation, and the College Board all call for increases in the proportion of persons earning some kind of post-secondary degree from what was about 39% to 55 or 60%. But in 2006, and this is all from the report, the National Academies report, look what's happening with minorities. In 2006, we had only 26% of African Americans, 18% of American Indians, and 16% of Hispanics in the 25 to 29-year-old cohort that attained at least an associate degree. So hence the challenge that we have in this country for reaching what the Obama administration and others are now calling for as a national goal. But when you start looking at STEM, the news is even worse. In 2000, the U.S. ranked 20th in the percent of 24-year-olds who had earned a first degree in natural sciences and engineering. We know that agencies don't all agree on how they define STEM, and at the National Science Foundation, STEM is defined very, very broadly because it includes the social sciences, including psychology and economics. So our study committee felt that it was important to focus a little bit more on the natural sciences and engineering because we'd have a much, much clearer picture of what's going on with the STEM workforce. So the Gathering Storm, particularly for natural sciences and engineering, recommended that we increase the proportion of persons earning these first degrees from 6 to at least 10%. But look at the proportion that we're showing currently with underrepresented minorities. Only 2.7% of African Americans, 3.3% of Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and only 2.2% of Hispanics and Latinos. So we would have to basically quadruple efforts in order to, with these underrepresented minorities, in order to reach any level of parity. So why do we have this problem? So the report itself shows that there isn't a difference in the aspiration of underrepresented minorities to major in STEM fields than anybody else. They truly aspire to major in STEM. But what's happening is that once they do enroll in major, that they're not graduating. They're not graduating at the same proportion as others. And there are lots of reasons for that that I'll also share with you in just a few moments. So look at what's happening in this country with STEM graduation over about over a 4-year period and a 5-year period. And you can see that we have a big problem with STEM completion overall in this country, not just with underrepresented minorities, but even the Asian Americans that tend to outpace everybody else. Overall, and these data were issued by the Higher Education Research Institute at the University of California, Los Angeles, but overall, in 5 years, fewer than 50% of students in this country are completing their degrees in STEM, those who started majoring in STEM. And you can see then the proportion, the bar is getting lower and lower and lower when you start looking at the performance of underrepresented minorities. The report says that in order to attack this problem, we really need to focus on these 4 things. Preparation. We know that the K-12 pipeline is expected to have a minority of underrepresented minorities, a majority of underrepresented minorities, and has to be a focal point of intervention at each transition point. That is from pre-K through 3rd grade, from 3rd through 6th grade, 6th all the way through middle school. Middle school has its own different set of issues. And then high school and the transition from high school to a 4-year institution. There is a lot of agreement about the need for preschool programs, more qualified math and science teachers and principals in predominantly minority and low-income schools. There's a need for challenging high school curricula as well as equitable distribution of resources. Now, with access and motivation, the report itself suggests that there is a need to improve awareness activities for prospective students. They really need to raise the career awareness through K-12 activities, improve counseling for math and science, and promote outreach specifically targeting underrepresented minorities. The terminology makes a big difference. Sometimes these programs, the various interventions programs, would say that we are seeking diversity. That isn't necessarily targeting underrepresented minorities. And so we're saying, then be specific if that is truly the goal. Affordability, we all know that financial support is strongly correlated with student attendance and persistence in general in STEM. And the financial assistance is much, much more effective with underrepresented minorities in reducing attrition when it is combined in conjunction with academic support and social integration. Academic support and social integration requires strong institutional leadership from all levels. It requires a campus-wide commitment to inclusiveness. It requires a very deliberate process of self-appraisal focused on campus climate. It requires continuous evaluation of efforts, as well as the development of a plan to implement constructive change. Now, I mentioned that we are having some real serious problems in making students aware of the potential opportunities in STEM, but also in motivating them to pursue STEM careers. But I thought I would just share this with you to show you what's happening with the workforce, the education workforce. So here's a distribution of elementary and secondary school teachers by race and ethnicity. And as you can see, still across the board, about 83% of our teachers are white. So we need to issue a different challenge to our institutions to do something about this whole issue. National strategies for STEM workforce development are shifting because of the changing dynamics that I just described. So let me just recap these very, very briefly. The science and technology community itself is becoming more global, it's becoming more virtual, becoming more interdisciplinary. The United States must develop a STEM workforce that is equipped with the skills necessary for this new global economy. We must understand the human dynamics of STEM career preparation and progression. STEM education and innovation policies are interrelated. Changing dynamics and the uncertain sources of the STEM workforce dictate the need to develop STEM talent from all segments of the population. And there will be fewer resources to meet national needs and priorities. The Rising Above the Gathering Storm report recommended that the Office of Science and Technology Policy establish a subcommittee of the National Science and Technology Council to develop a 5-year strategic plan for STEM education that would do these things. The America Competes Reauthorization Act of 2010 specifically calls for information about programs for groups underrepresented in STEM, including women and persons with disabilities. The inventory is complete and was supposed to be released sometime this fall, and it's just like everything else with us, fall can be extended to winter, so we'll get it, I suppose, sometime soon. But I will give you, I'll tell you, I've listened to some preliminary reports about the inventory, and what they're finding from all the data submitted by all the federal agencies in this country is that the biggest problem that we're having right now is the lack of longitudinal data. And so there's going to be, and we can all expect this, on the university level, expect to have these requirements to flow down to you in your grants and contract agreements issued by these agencies. Much, much more demand for data and longitudinal data and tracking to demonstrate the impact of these programs. The strategic plan itself will be issued along with the FY 2013 President's budget. So I just wanted to mention this to you. So the shifting national strategies for STEM workforce development are these: coordination and collaboration, both internally as well as externally, and NASA has already started this, NSF has started this. But those partnerships are going to continue, and the nature of the partnerships will be very, very, very focused. The coordination and collaboration will also deal with, as I mentioned, some of the human factors issues. You've heard lots of reports recently, announcements that is, about the Career Work-Life Balance Initiative at the National Science Foundation. And the National Science Foundation is actually joining other organizations to begin figuring out how to accommodate work-life balance requirements, both in research, the policies governing research, grants and contracts, as well as on campus, the policies to enable women particularly to be able to remain in the STEM workforce. So you can expect more discussions about that. The new logic models. You will find, once this whole strategic plan is issued by OSTP, that our federal agencies are going to rethink the construct of the programs that we're currently offering to our constituents. And we'll decide whether or not some of these need to be push strategies or pull strategies. And that's because, you know, universities are very, very slow and resistant to change. which is why we've had so much difficulty in getting a lot of the interdisciplinary programs implemented on these campuses. But there'll also be perhaps an opportunity for, as well as a catalyst for pilot programs to just test some of the more innovative ideas for the interventions that we are continuing to implement on these campuses. Research. One of the suggestions I have for NASA is one that we're doing at the NSF, and that is to fund more research. And the research that NASA should perhaps begin funding more should be to inform practice. We need answers to questions about what interventions work and what makes them work. We don't understand enough about replication and scalability, particularly about programs that are designed to broaden the participation of minorities in STEM. Why are institutions not changing? Well, we know some of the answers. Some of them have to do with accreditation committees. Some of them have to do with boards of trustees. Some of them have to do with tradition. And we also know that faculty basically control curriculum. But if we are going to get any momentum whatsoever with our institutions, perhaps we can have some additional research to help them to guide some of this transformation. Horizontal and vertical integration. I mentioned earlier that we have been addressing STEM education fairly almost in a vacuum. Well, we can't do that anymore because it isn't decoupled from innovation policy and innovation strategy, and it should not be decoupled. So we have to start thinking about now how to integrate all of the dimensions of STEM education and training. Training. How are our students trained? Well, we provide fellowships, for example. We provide research assistantships via our research grants and contracts. But I can tell you that most of our agencies don't know who we're supporting as research assistants because we don't collect the data. We also know that, for the most part, our fellowships are pretty much restricted to U.S. citizens or permanent residents, but a lot of the research assistantships are not. And so the research assistantships are supporting probably more of our foreign students than they are U.S. students. But if you start to think about it and think about the impact of undergraduate research experiences on the success as well as the competitiveness of minority students further on in their career, then we need maybe a little bit of a paradigm shift. That's a sidebar. All right, aligning key components of the system. Now, I've already talked about the interrelatedness between science and technology investments and STEM workforce development. So as NASA begins to build these partnerships internally with the research, with the field offices, we have to start thinking about now how to connect all parts of the system together. And then address the skill gaps. Skill gaps as well as the issues of equity as well as diversity. Assessment and evaluation, extremely important. As I've mentioned to you, that is not going to go away. In fact, it's going to increase. And so I'd like to just end my discussion with you this morning with this call to action. Now, I presented this call to action last year when I did the presentation here. And I looked at it again and I said, well, you know what? This is the same call to action, so I'm going to put it back up here again and challenge you to reconsider and perhaps have some continued conversation about these issues. One thing that we definitely have to do, in spite of the prognosis about the budget, the environment, all the economic things can be a little bit pressing. We still have to reinvigorate hope and provide a lot of excitement about STEM careers to prospective students. We need to focus on diversity in STEM leadership and faculty. We need to be able to catalyze institutional transformation through integration and innovation. We know how institutions change. All NASA has to do is put some different language in its program solicitations and see if the universities don't follow suit. They do with the NSF program announcements and solicitations. So, if this is what we have to do as a push strategy, then let's do it. But we also need new ideas. We need innovative ideas about STEM education. And we need to be able to incubate those ideas, to test them, to pilot them, and then to be able to provide some resources for them to be replicated, those that are demonstrated to be successful. And of course, we have to continue to do research. We have to continue to assess and evaluate. And then we need to be able to disseminate whatever information that we glean to the rest of the constituents as lessons learned. And create this community of scholars, this community of practice, so that we can continue to improve on what we're doing that truly, truly does work and assist us collectively in addressing these myriad issues. So I thank you very much for your attention. It's very early in the morning, but I thank you very, very much for the opportunity to speak to you again. Yes, if you have some questions, I'd be glad to answer them. How much time do we have? None? Okay.
Thank you for your warm and, again, informative presentation. On the data on the graduation rates in the STEM, do you have, off the top of your head, any information on non-STEM graduation rates?
Yes, in fact, I had a chart that I could have brought, but I decided not to, and found that we're doing better with students who began their careers with the non-STEM disciplines. We aren't doing that great, but the rates are over a 4-year period, maybe about 10% higher. So we're doing about 55%, and there may be around 60% for the non-STEM areas over the 6 years.
So still a problem.
It's still a problem.
Just not as severe.
Yes.
Thank you.
And actually, if we disaggregate the data by discipline, or we disaggregate the data further by sex, then you see the problem is even worse with certain disciplines.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I'm over here. Okay. And you mentioned a report that you said outlined the strategies of 6 countries in their academic preparation for STEM professionals. Do you by any chance know the name of the report offhand? Or can you?
Okay, could you repeat your question and speak just a little bit louder?
Okay. You mentioned a report that outlined the strategies of 6 countries in their preparation of STEM professionals. And I was wondering if you could tell us the name of that report or let us know where we can go and gain access to it.
Okay, the report itself really doesn't talk about STEM professionals. The report is really comparing the science and technology strategies among 6 countries and providing some implications for the United States. So the comment that I shared with you was one of the implications included in a report about how the United States needs to and can improve its own global positioning. So it wasn't, the report itself really wasn't about STEM education.
But do you know the report name or where we?
Sure. The report is entitled and you can go to the National Academy's website, nas.edu, go to the National Academy's press, and type in the title of the report. It's called S&T Strategies of 6 Countries, Implications for the United States. And it was published in 2010.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Catherine Charvides. Thank you again for your presentation. In regards to technology, engineering, science, mathematics, STEM, how do you propose that we evaluate the effectiveness of teachers beginning to bring these standards into their classroom? Because many times we're working with a science teacher or a math teacher or a technology teacher, but they don't bring the crossover of the standards. They'll say, I'm just a biology teacher, or I'm just a physics teacher. And then when we're writing our grants and we want to bring in assessment companies or personnel, those are normally very hefty fee organizations to bring into a grant. And then where do we see our assessment results in a publication or for universities to see so that they know that we're making inroads with our STEM education and programs in the community? Thank you.
There is another publication that I can probably refer you to, and it is called Interventions at Work. And in that publication, there is a list of programs involving all kinds of collaborations, all kinds of partnerships, all kinds of strategies. Some of them are programs including, with partnerships between K through 12 and universities. Some of them have industries as partners, but they're different types of strategies, and all of them have conducted some kind of assessment. Some of them have been formal, some of them have not, but they have some indicators of success, and those are all published. They're also presented at a conference focused on interventions every year, funded by AAAS, and I don't know, and typically it's in the spring, but it is kind of a showcase of various intervention options to demonstrate what can work under certain situations. So I think that it's very, very important to publicize. It's very important to publicize wherever you can possibly publicize. Send your article to Science Magazine, send your article to the Chronicle of Higher Education, send your article to organizations like AAAS that has a separate office focused on careers, but they published articles like this. So it is very, very, very important to continue to publicize these because, but when you publicize them, make sure that you include, well, let me put it like this. The problem that we had when we did this study in trying to find examples of exemplary programs was that there wasn't data. These programs have been around for years, 10, 15 years, but they never did an evaluation. Not a formal evaluation, not a structured evaluation, yet they were successful. So you got to be careful in calling it an exemplary program without something that provides the evidence documenting the fact that it is exemplary. And we haven't even agreed basically on what that criteria really is. But to the extent that you have a story to tell, by all means tell it, and tell it as broadly as you possibly can. The professional societies and associations also have journals, and I think would be interested in that kind of success story.
Thank you very much.